everybody, to another edition of Is My Nose Stuffed Up? Why do I sound like this? Also, doing business as Sad Times. I'm your host, Kevin. So glad you're here. If you have never been here before, welcome. Here is a quick primer. Sad Times is a show in which each week we have a kind and generous guest who comes on and talks about his or her struggles through traumas, difficult times, maybe some mental illness that they've dealt with, any number of things. The goal here is to allow those stories to be told so that all of us in the good old human race, and even Brent, are able to listen to these stories and maybe hear something that they thought, oh my goodness, I thought I was the only one who dealt with that. I thought I was the only one who felt that way. We're not here to diagnose, judge, or solve any of the problems that these stories present. It's just to allow that story to be told. So that's Sad Times. Thank you again for being here. In all honesty, if you know somebody who might find some solace in this show, please recommend it to them. That's the whole goal of the show, is to have these stories told so that people can feel less alone. We do have a beautiful website, and I like to do the www part because it makes Brent squirms in his chair, because Brent's like, it's not 1995. www.sadtimespodcast.com. There you can find all of our episodes, some other stuff. If you'd like to be a guest, you can reach out there as well. And of course, you can find Sad Times wherever they magically appear on your handheld device or computer or flying saucer, whatever. So that's Sad Times. Before we get to our great guests this week, we're going to go to our sponsor. Today's sponsor is news notifications about where to start your day. What makes waking up even better? Being told by a news organization that not only is the world exploding, but also here's a picture of an alligator on a golf course, and that you had damn well better start your day here or else, or what else? Clicks will go down. That's news notifications about where to start your day. Supposed answers to all the questions packaged in 5 easy bite-sized chunks. I've turned almost all those off except for one. So basically what I'm saying is, sorry, sponsor. I mean, you can't turn them off. Anyway, if you would like to support our sponsors, as always, please do. We need that. Keeps the lights on. Just use the code FAKE at checkout. That's FAKE. All right, now that we've paid the bills, let's get to the real reason we're here. And I'd like to welcome in David on the show. Hey, Dave, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Dude, thank you so much for being here. So now you and I don't know each other other than when we spoke before. So tell us a little bit about where you're from and kind of just a little background on you.
Okay. I'm from Oakland, California. I live in Berkeley, California now. I grew up in a multicultural household. My father's from Iran. My mother's from here in the States. I went to school in the Bay Area, jumped around Oakland, San Francisco, got kicked out of one school along the way, found my way back, and ended up going to Dartmouth for college after I got my shit together. And
Ivy League.
Yeah. It was a bumpy road to get there. I'm hard of hearing, actually. So when I grew up, I had a hearing aid when I was really young. And every morning when I got dropped off at school, because the kids, man, these fucking kids were world-class name callers. So they came up with the name Daffy Duck. And so every morning, I know, right?
That's
so every
horrible.
morning when my mom dropped me off at school, as soon as she had pulled off in the minivan down the hill, I put the hearing aid in my pocket. So I never got much out of it, and really struggled in school. Couldn't really hear and kind of acted out. And it wasn't until high school.
Because of these jerks were saying that to you. So this is a way. And then of course that's impacting your learning because you can't hear maybe what the teacher's saying.
Oh yeah. And I mentioned that because it'll come up later, not the hearing part or the Daffy Duck Looney Tunes reference, but the fact that the fact that I felt this sort of stigma around it and kind of reacted to it. Because I think that's an important theme as we get into topics that we'll get into later. But I went to Dartmouth, and then I think when I was at school that's kind of where I first started encountering symptoms of mental illness. And I didn't really know what they were at the time, didn't really understand what was going on. And that began a very long, bumpy road over the next decade plus, that I kind of, I saw my life go from kind of on a clear and bright track to winding up suffering from bipolar disorder, getting to be suicidal at a certain point, not really being able to be vulnerable enough about having a mental illness to like get treatment for it, self-medicating to cope for about the better part of a decade or so or more.
So sorry, go ahead.
And that brought me to a pivotal point in my life when in my early 30s, when I decided to be vulnerable about what was going on and choose sobriety and choose self-care and treatment. And that was kind of the beginning of the new life I'm living now.
Awesome. And yeah, I like that you said choose self-care and treatment, because that reminds me of when we talked before. I think, and we'll get to it, you have some really, I don't know, profound thoughts on that idea. I think it's something that everybody's like, oh, self-care this, self-care that. The thoughts that you had on it really rang true to me. So I look forward to talking about that. I wanted to ask you, when you were in your early 20s or thereabouts, when you said that it started presenting itself, what do you mean by that? What were some of the symptoms that you were dealing with?
Yeah, it was, everybody's had a bad mood, and I think everybody can relate to, that just sort of basic waking up on the wrong side of bed feeling. But at a certain point, around the time I was probably 20, that started to take on a whole new shape and dimension. And it wasn't like, oh man, like I don't feel like getting out of bed today. It was more like the bed had a force of gravity, and I literally felt trapped in it. And it's hard to explain that to someone who like doesn't really know what a mood disorder is or know what depression is firsthand, because it kind of just sounds like, well, get your ass out of bed, dude. No big deal. But if you are really trapped in a depressive episode, it's not that simple. And tasks like brushing your teeth can seem weighty and
that's
arduous.
What I was going to ask. I was going to say, does it feel like a weight? And you said like the bed had its own gravity pull. What might have helped was news notifications to start your day.
That's what I was missing. But this was back in like the early 2000s. Man, we didn't have all that.
Stone Age.
I know.
Bad times. That's it. You're like, I don't know where to start my day. I guess I've got a mood disorder. Thank God for news notifications.
Right.
All joking aside. When you have that, that's got to be pretty alarming when you start feeling something that strongly. And was it every morning? Did it kind of come and go?
No, not at all. I would have a few days where I'd feel like that, and it was hard to get anywhere. It was hard to talk to people. Honestly, like having a one-on-one conversation might feel like I was talking to a crowd. Like that's how difficult it was. But, on like the flip of a switch, I could be a totally different person. And so I spent a few days like that. And then I'd spend a few days just feeling elated and feeling like an immense connection to everyone around me and total sense of joy in whatever I was doing. I wanted to stay up late, wanted to talk to everyone. I'd just be a different person. And I had no idea like what that was. I had a sense that it was different. I kind of knew that like, okay, this probably isn't like a universal experience that everyone is sharing, like something different's going on with me, but I wasn't in a position to understand it. I definitely wasn't in a position to talk about it. And that's when I really started to realize like how much better drinking made me feel. Like I learned to drink when I was pretty young. I learned to drink in middle school. Like that was when, and everybody, I'll say everybody, that's probably not true, but a lot of kids, that's when they start experimenting with the stuff, They start experimenting at some point. But for me, I remember when alcohol touched my lips, like it felt like the thing that had been missing from my body my whole life. I had such a strong reaction to it. It made me feel so good. And I learned like pretty early, man, like this makes me feel better. And if I'm sad, this helps a lot. And if I'm feeling like high as a kite, drinking just makes it more fun. And I could just drink nonstop. So in college, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, in college, probably had some binge drinking, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Would you have the repercussions? Excuse me. Would you notice the repercussions from the drinking would exacerbate your symptoms, or did that not matter because you could just drink again?
No, I think the answer to both those questions is yes. Like I did notice that everything had like an equal and opposite reaction, right? So like if I'm really, really sad, I know the drinking will make me feel better. And I'm aware that the next day is going to be, a problem, but it's the allure of self-medicating right now is generally enough to kind of kick off the concern about how I'm going to feel tomorrow. And then there's also the assurance that like, yeah, for the most part, I'm gonna be able to drink tomorrow too. And like the school I went to, I don't know. I don't want to speak for every school and every student's experience, but like college is a pretty easy place to get comfortable drinking and have access to alcohol. And I think my school in particular, because we were in the middle of fucking nowhere and it was just a small little incubated campus, and getting alcohol was pretty normal. It was pretty easy. So I fell into, I didn't even fall into it. I embraced it. Like I knew that it made me feel better when I was depressed. And so I leaned in pretty hard to it when I needed to. And then the symptoms started getting worse. And I think it's like 75% of most mental illnesses like manifest in the early 20s. Depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, they all start showing up around that age. And so that's when they really started to that's really when they started to get bad. And all of a sudden remember those 2 days or 3 days I was talking about where it was hard to talk to people and I just felt like alone in the universe. It started to be a few weeks.
A few weeks in a row.
Yeah. Yeah.
And would you just stay? Would you be able to go to class?
Well, so this is after I graduated. So now I'm like, I'm an adult. And like the summer after I graduated, I pushed myself through the day. I'm sure I missed some work here and there, but like I took the approach of, so I was like a random connection, but like I was on the crew team in college and I learned from that experience, like how to work through just discomfort. Yeah. Like it's just something I learned to do. And it's probably something I learned from my dad. Like I just had a pain tolerance and an ability to kind of work through things. So, I mean, I could wake up and I could fake it. I could push myself through it. I could be crying in the morning and find a way to wipe the tears and like get in the front door to work, and I pushed through a lot of situations where I probably shouldn't have pushed through it. I probably should have gotten help. Yeah. But I just said, okay, I'm going to bury this today. And then on the other side of it, a week or 10 days or whatever later, I wasn't depressed at all. All of a sudden I felt like on top of the world. And I was partying again. I was staying up late. I would just max out every credit card I had. Fortunately, like my credit card limits weren't very high, thank God, because I would just spend through every dollar I could get access to.
Did you realize you were doing, I mean, that's kind of a dumb question, but like, are you aware, okay, I only have, I don't know, $100 more left to spend, or you're just like using it until it doesn't work?
No, you just use it until it doesn't work. Okay. I mean, like a complete disconnect from reality there. Like I ran up tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt like when I hardly even had an income, and this was 20 years ago. So that $30,000 was more than,
Yeah.
and that should have been a terrifying number to me, but like, you just don't give a shit. It's a real disconnect. So this is kind of how I was rolling. And then the job I ended up taking, I always liked working with kids, and I always wanted to be a helpful person. And I did community service through high school and college. And so my first job ended up being with at-risk kids at a residential treatment facility. So I lived and worked at a place with about 30 kids that had been incarcerated or were foster kids taken from their homes and other like at-risk scenarios. So the job was crazy, and the demand that it had on me, like when I got manic and when my mood was revved up, it almost put me in a spot where like I could kind of hyper function. Like this job needed me to stay up all night anyways. Like I had to like chase kids at 10 p.m. or break up fights in the middle of the night. And it honestly helped me do that because I had so much energy and I wasn't really sleeping anyways. So I could perform like the job needed to, and everybody thought I was doing good.
Yeah. And so I'm not really familiar. I certainly don't have personal experience with it. So when the symptoms got worse, did you go to a doctor and you were diagnosed?
Eventually.
So about when was that?
So I was working for like probably a year and a half at this, about a year and a half at this treatment center. And I've lost a ton of weight. I look like shit, but I somehow can run around and function with these kids. And I had been, so here was like here's when I hit the wall. So I had been up for really like riding extremely high for a couple weeks. And I didn't have a day off of work. Like some people were gone or quit or whatever. So I was stuck for about 2 weeks working by myself with a group of 10 kids, no co-counselor, whatever. And I just handled it. Mm-hmm. And I finally got off work, and I had this idea like, okay, I'm going to go tomorrow on my day off. I'm going to ride my bike. I'm going to do a 50-mile ride. And then after that, I'm going to park my bike and I'm going to run a half marathon, 13 miles or whatever. Jeez. And I had mapped out this course, and like I was in shape, but that wasn't something I did. I did not do that stuff. It was just like kind of an idea. And I had so much energy that I believe like the only way I could get to sleep that night is if I did that and used like all the gas in the tank. And so I did it, and I was flying, and I felt like I could have run through a wall. And finally, like at the very end, I finally felt tired. I'm like, oh, okay. Like I kind of feel numb. I sort of feel like I'll be able to go to sleep tonight. I don't need to have a drink to go to sleep. My mind finally quieted down, and like the racing, frantic fucking thoughts slowed down to a crawl. And I'm like, this is great. And I woke up, 8 hours later, and just over the course of going to sleep, I woke up and immediately I knew that it was the worst day of my life. The change in my mood from going to bed to the next morning, it was so drastic, so sharp, so jarring. I'd never felt that bad in any episode I'd had where I thought about hurting myself and thought about all kinds of violent thoughts. This was by far the worst thing. And the thing about an episode like that, like you could have 10 of these episodes, and each one, it feels like the last one. It feels like it'll never end, even though you've had 9 before that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. When you're in the middle of them, you truly believe that you're going to feel that way for the rest of your life.
And that's for both the high and the low.
That when you're high, it doesn't really matter, and you don't really care, and you don't really feel a sense of consequences. So it's not scary. Yeah, you feel like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
This won't end either, but you don't want it to. When you wake up and your mind is racing with anxious, violent, twisted thoughts that really have you believing you'd be better off dead, like you want that to end more than anything. It's again, it kind of is like what I said before, but it's very hard to describe this pain. And the only like image I could really give someone is that it feels like tiny shards of glass, 1,000 of them just lodged in your mind. Like it almost takes the shape of a physical discomfort when your mind is turning on itself like this. So I was turning on myself, and within like an hour, I believed that the only way I could feel better is if I cut myself open and let the pain leave with like a stream of blood. I believed that, and I conjured that up, and it made sense. And so I'm like, I found at some point, I'm like, I have to talk to someone. If I'm alone, like I'm turning on myself. And I found my boss, and like, he's like, "Oh, hey, Dave, how was your day off?" And before I could even get a word out, I'm choking up, and tears are streaming down my face, and I can't even talk. And he knew something was. This wasn't like, Dave needs a little help right now. He knew something was off, so he, in a major way. So he went and got the counselor that worked there, that actually worked with the kids. Uh-huh. So there was an on-site like therapist, and he went and got him to talk to me. But I couldn't sit still, and so I had to get on the move, and I just was obsessed with this idea of hurting myself, believing that I would be better off dead, believing that in a real visceral way. And so I found a spot by myself, and we always had a knife on us because our job was it was like an outdoor setting. And so we just did activities, and we cut lashings to make tents, and we just always had a knife. That was normal. It was a utility knife. And I had it in my pocket, and I clipped it open, and I held it up against my skin, and I started to press down, and I watched the skin kind of twist and contort. And the last thing I remember thinking, this is a weird thought. This is the last thing I could ever remember, though, was that I remember thinking that skin is a lot more resilient than I thought it would be. It's not that fragile. It's kind of leathery, and it's kind of stretchy, and it has resilience to it. And I had that thought. And then the counselor, his name was Mike, found me, and he ran up from behind me and tackled me to the ground and took the knife out of my hand. And that was the last thing I remember.
When you're talking about turning on yourself and this thought, was it just obsessively your brain? Was it as simple as your brain is saying, you need to hurt yourself, you need to cut yourself, that's the only way you get out of this? Is that kind of the way that your thoughts were? Yeah.
I mean, it was really simple. I firmly believe that the pain I was feeling in that moment would never end. And I concluded that this pain is more than I can bear if it's never going to end. Therefore, to kill myself is the only way out of this. And that thought it was logical and connected.
Yeah. Think about it too, Dave. I mean, that's 20 years ago, right? Think for somebody maybe like myself who's not dealt with that type of mental illness, how do you go and explain that to somebody? It's one thing to go talk to a therapist about it or the counselor, but your best friend, your family, and they're like, "What do you mean?" You know what I mean? And it's did you feel shame around it too?
Yeah. So I'm gonna answer that question with like the next bus stop in this story. So,
okay.
So I woke up, and I was in a white room. I was in a psychiatric hospital, and with the fucking tag on my wrist. And the first thing I remember thinking was, what if people find out? And how fucked up is that? Like, I just had the worst day of my life. Could have been the last day of my life. I'm in a psychiatric hospital. And my first thought is, oh no, what will people think? And so, like that's the answer to your question is I didn't want to talk about this at all. So I got diagnosed there, like they put me on so many drugs there that I was a zombie in that place for 2 weeks, like catatonic state.
You were there for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was when they diagnosed me there, and I talked to a bunch of counselors and doctors. And at one point, one of them just explained to me, like, what you've been experiencing, this bipolar disorder, and it's an alternating state of mania and depression characterized by, these symptoms during these mood swings and these by others. And I just wasn't hearing, I couldn't really let mental illness or condition like really register with me. But I participated, like I took the pills, like it was sort of comforting to know that like, I'm like, okay, like it has a name. Like that means, cause dude, I thought I was just losing my fucking mind. Like,
did you think you were the only person this was happening to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this wasn't like, I mean, I would be, when my mind was racing, I'd be sitting there talking to people, and I obsessing with the most violent images going through my head. Or if a car drove by, I thought, oh man, like, what if I jump in front of it? If I was near a cliff or a roof, I thought, oh man, like, what if I just fall to my death? I thought this shit all the time. And I didn't have any idea that like there was anyone else in the universe thinking that. So my conclusion was I'm going insane, whatever that means. So when the guy told me, you have bipolar disorder, it was sort of comforting to know that like there was a name to it and that someone else had it. And there was probably medicine and there was a chapter on it in the DSM. Like it made it sort of comforting in that way. But also at the same time, like I couldn't disconnect it from like, oh, this means I'm weak because I can't beat it. I can't get over this illness. I'm not strong enough to deal with it. Either I've got it and I'm not strong enough to beat it, or like I'm a weak person and that's why I got it to begin with. Like that doesn't sound logical to me right now as I'm saying it. I realize, or probably to you, but like that's really what it is. You think it's weakness, especially like being a young American guy and being around like the communities I had been in. It wasn't in our lexicon. We didn't talk about mental illness then, and we don't that much now either.
Right.
It's gotten better, but so my approach was, okay, I'm gonna learn a little bit. I'm gonna leave this place with some instructions and some prescriptions and an operating manual of what I need to do to like keep myself somewhat safe, and then I'm never gonna talk about it again. That was the plan.
And was there? So a couple things I wanted to say. One, you said, it seemed logical to you. It might not sound logical to me. The sad thing is that is one of the great things about mental illness I think people don't talk about is how certain and logical it feels in your mind. No matter if you have people, friends, family, doctors telling you it's not this, it's the certitude in the mind that makes, at least in my experience, so unbelievably troubling. And okay. So I just want to acknowledge that because I totally hear what you're saying. And then when you left, you said you're not going to talk to anybody. So did they just say, here are some pills, or did they say you should see a therapist as well?
Oh, they said you should see a therapist. They said, here's your prescriptions. Take 3 of these, 2 of these, and 1 of those.
Right.
And one thing they said with emphasis was like drinking and doing drugs can exacerbate symptoms and it can trigger episodes and you probably shouldn't do it. And that part, I mean, if it's not clear already, that part wasn't something I accepted. It was kind of just like, whatever, don't go there, So, but I did take my pills. They prescribed me mood stabilizer, an antidepressant, and an antipsychotic. I'm still on the same antidepressant and mood stabilizers now. And so I left, and I had a girlfriend at the time who, and like, we'll get to this, but the amazing part about that girlfriend is that she's my wife now. And the next 20 years of my life, like she has been there for, particularly that decade where after I left the hospital where things got worse and worse for 10 years. And I wouldn't be here without her. That's for sure. She's the only person that knew what was going on, that was close to me. She came and saw me when I was in the hospital. because she found out where I was from Mike, the counselor. And, seeing her was really hard, seeing her there, like I felt shame. I felt guilt that I wasn't there at work with the people that needed me. I felt shame that I was not like this strong pillar of like whatever a boyfriend is supposed to be, or a man, or some idea in my head of what her boyfriend should be, and that person wouldn't be someone that's in the mental hospital, So when she came to see me, it was really hard.
Yeah, and going back to that first thought you had when you woke up in the psychiatric hospital, what if somebody finds out, and here's somebody that you love that cares about you, and then so that had to have been extremely difficult, and I think it's wonderful that she came to be there for you. I think that's wonderful. So you've talked a lot about drinking. Tell me, I want to get to the 10 drink rule here in a second. So just a little teaser. Was it that you kept drinking because it effectively took care of whatever was going on in your head, at least at the time that you were drinking? And is that really what drew you to it? Or was it also, hey, this is fun, I'm young, all this stuff, combination of both? And tell us kind of when you say you would go out drinking, like what that would be like.
I didn't stop drinking after the hospital. I might have had, okay, maybe I'll try to control it a little bit, but if I did, it didn't last long. Drinking made me feel better. Drinking was intoxicating in a way that was unusual. I think I said earlier, like it felt like it was the thing missing from my body. Like that's how I think about alcohol still. And I haven't touched it in 11, almost 12 years.
Good for you.
So we moved to the Bay Area. Like we worked there for 2 years, and that was the commitment we made to the program. We moved to the Bay Area, and I started working, and I got a job. I started working in real estate, and just as an independent contractor and agent, kind of scraping together a few deals. And you hear my dog? He's going.
What kind of dog do you have?
After it right now. Oh man, we have a rescue dog. Who's a mutt that we rescued. He's been doing this, barking at everything he sees for the past 15 years. So that's well,
it sounds like what is it? The old dog, new tricks. It sounds like he's gonna keep barking then.
Oh yeah, no, he's riding it out. Yeah. So I apologize.
That's all right.
He'll stop at some point. And so I drank to feel better. And it got more and more reckless. It got more and more dangerous. And I didn't think of drinking as like whatever normal is. I don't want to say like a normal person, but like I didn't drink in a conventional way of like, okay, I'm going to have a few glasses of wine for dinner, or I'm going to get a little tanked at the tailgate at the 49ers game. I only knew the act of drinking as getting unconscious to the point of getting drunk to the point of unconsciousness, forgetting everything. That's what drinking was. It was getting that drunk every time. And that got to be like dozens of drinks. Like that might sound like I'm exaggerating, but I'm not at all. There was nights where I had 30 or more beers, which would probably kill me if I had those now, but I built up that amount of tolerance on a regular basis.
Wow.
Yeah.
And would your girlfriend or friends, did they just kind of accept this about you or were people kind of talking to you about it?
Yeah. I mean, when it started to get really bad, I started to get in fights, and that's when it was really like showing itself in an outward expression. People really seeing like, he doesn't just look like a little bit too drunk. Like Dave got arrested last night. Like I got arrested 3 times in this period. It was always for something, always something violent. Getting in a fight. I got into fights when I was in jail, because I got there and I was still so loaded. I wanted to keep fighting. Like I wasn't even scared or thrown off by the fact that I was in jail. And I was like, let's keep fighting. I wasn't like a happy, silly drunk. That's the thing. Like I wasn't even happy. It just, I usually, I usually got taken over by a certain kind of rage at some point, but that rage felt a lot better than, the anxiety or the depression that I might be feeling otherwise.
I think that's extremely telling, by the way, right?
Yeah.
To say that that state still felt better to you than your normal day to day, right?
Yeah, it felt intoxicating. And like, so this went on and on. Like friends, yeah, like I there's a lot of friends that just stopped being my friend. And the friends that were still kind of connected to me, like they didn't really want to see me as much, and they kept their distance, particularly if it was going to be like us going out. But the ones that were still around, like, yeah, people started to talk to me, let me know, like, dude, sooner or later, like something real bad is going to happen. Like you're not, you're not going to keep bouncing back up on your feet like a cat with 9 lives. Like, this is getting really, really bad. And like, because I was getting other people in dangerous situations. Like on one of those nights I got arrested, my friend got arrested with me just for being with me, and he didn't do anything. Yeah. Like, I started a fight and he was just there, and he had to spend the night in jail because of me. I'm sure he wanted to keep his distance after that. So eventually, like the last night I ever drank, no one wanted to go out with me. I got loaded by myself. And at this point, my girlfriend had pretty much gotten to the point where she said, like, I love you and I know who you are. And I met you when you were this amazing mentor to these kids and helped us run this camp, and you helped so many kids. And I know that that's you in there somewhere, but I can't keep watching this up close. And I can't keep wondering if I'm going to get a phone call from jail or if you're not going to come home. And like, I need to step back. And so she was on the verge of, she was on the verge of disappearing. And if she had, like, I know full well that I wouldn't be here now. The last night I ever drank, I went out by myself. And at this point I felt like she was on her way out and I was deteriorating. And at that point, you start to black out so easily when you're drinking that much alcohol regularly. Like your mind just shuts off very quickly. Like your ability to remember things like really falls apart. And but to me, and maybe you can relate, or a lot of people can, like, people say blacking out a lot, like that's kind of a phrase, but you always kind of remember something. Like you remember, like, oh yeah, but we got pizza at this place, right? Or like, oh yeah, I remember like when that song came on and we danced, or oh yeah, I had a cigarette with an old friend. Like you remember a couple things and then you start to stitch the night together. But this night I remember, the last thing I remember was being outside having a cigarette, and I woke up the next morning. And I was in my apartment and I have blood all over me, like dried in my hair. I had bruises, and a fat lump on my head, and blood on my clothes. And I had not a shred of an idea how or why, which is crazy to sustain that much damage and have no idea how it happened. And sooner or later, I started wondering how I got home and find my keys. And I'm like, started to get petrified that I drove home in this state. So I started running around the neighborhood looking to see if my car is there, because if my car is there, I drove home. If it's not, I left it somewhere on the other side of town. And I'm just praying that I can't find this fucking car. And I get, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks. And sure enough, I see like the silver bumper as I'm going down whatever street, and my heart just sank. And I get to the car and there's blood inside the car. There's blood on the door. And again, it doesn't even ring a bell. I have no idea how I got home, how I got hurt, or any of it. And dude, like that was the moment where, I don't know how it wasn't clear already, but that was the moment where I'm like, oh, I'm not just going to kill myself. Like I'm going to destroy someone else's world like this. Like I'm going to fucking kill someone, and I'm going to really hurt someone. And it's not just about me. And I had that thought, and I ran home, and because I still don't even know. I'm like, did I hit and run? What did I do? Like, I think this is my blood. And so I'm online. I went to the SFPD website, and I'm like, was there any reported hit and runs? Like, is there anything that's happened that I might be tied to? And I eventually kind of figure out, okay, probably not. But like that feeling at that point was etched into me permanently. And I knew that this was only going to end one way. Like, I'm going to stop this, or I'm going to die and take someone with me. And maybe I'll crash into a brick wall, or maybe I'll just wilt away if I keep doing this for a few more years, but sooner or later I'm going to die. And that was clear. And so a couple days later, like I begged my girlfriend, like, help me, stay with me. I'm going to work through this with you, for myself. She found a chemical dependency recovery program and took me there like a day or two after this night. And I met a counselor there on my first appointment. And I kind of told her, like, I've still got like a black eye and I look like shit. And I told her what the last few years had looked like. And I didn't even know her. And she looked at me straight up and she was like, you are not going to survive. I know that. I'm telling you that straight up. You're not going to survive. And you need to give yourself 30 days. And I'm not saying you can never drink. I'm not saying anything. I just know that you need to give yourself 30 days. And that's all there is to it. And I mean, if she had said that a few months ago, or I probably wouldn't have listened, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But she said, you need to give yourself 30 days. And I believed when she said it, that I believed her. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm looking at the writing on the wall here.
Yeah.
And the look in her eyes when she said it, I'm like, this is legit. And, but I still didn't think I could do it by myself. So what I did before I had thought about it too long, within like 24 hours, I thought to myself, like, I have let myself down so many times because, 10 drink rule, like along the way in all this, like, it's not like I never thought, I need to slow down, or I need to stop, I need to moderate. It's not like the thought hadn't crossed my mind, and I tried many times. And like, at one point I was like, okay, first step is a 10 drink rule. Like, if I don't have more than 10 drinks, I'm probably not going to completely lose my shit, you know? And 10 drinks is a crazy amount. Like,
that's
at the time,
that's
a lot of drinks. And at the time that would have been a mild amount for me. And I was like, okay, I get this 10 drink rule in place and I'll get very drunk, but I probably won't end up in jail or won't end up in a really bad situation. And, you know, I mean, as you can imagine, like, I didn't last very long. When you get to 10, you know, I
just don't understand how you have the willpower at 10 with all, you know what I mean? Like, how do you stop? But
it worked for a few months. I remember the period where, like, there was this slight uptick in how I was doing. I was drinking a little bit less, drinking 7, 8, 9 drinks. And like, the feedback I got was really good. I remember going to birthday parties and dinners and having people feel like, hey, you know what? Like, thanks for keeping your shit together and not ruining my birthday party. Because I ruined a lot of my friends' birthday parties or get-togethers. Wow. And I got some positive feedback there. And, but yeah, I didn't sustain it. So what I did after my first day at the chemical dependency program, I wrote an email to like everyone I knew. And I told, you know, if I had you on my phone or my contact book, I'd put you on this email. And I told everyone what had happened the most recently. Like, I woke up on Sunday morning, I had blood all over me. I know I have a major problem, and I'm sorry for all the situations I put you in, but I need to spend some time without any alcohol in my body, and I'm going to do it. And I'm asking for your support or your help in any way that you can, to take a walk with me, to go to a movie with me, anything to help me get pulled away from a bar or whatever. Because my thought was, and this is a big takeaway maybe for someone, but like, my thought was, I've let myself down hundreds of times, but I don't think I'm going to let down all these people. I'm going to make a bond with my girlfriend and my friends and everyone I knew. And I don't think I'm going to break that. I'll let myself down if I make this little promise to myself. I'll be drinking by Wednesday and manage to forget how bad everything has been. But if I promise girlfriend, my buddies, my sisters, I don't think I'm going to break that promise.
Yeah. And how telling is it too that you've gone from waking up and the first thought being, what if somebody finds out, to you being proactive and saying, I have this problem. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
It was hard. I mean, hitting send on that email was crazy. Like, that was a really hard thing to do because you can't take that back. Or I knew I couldn't let everyone down. That was my last shot. And I'm like, this is the only way I'm going to make this happen is if I get up and I shout this from the mountaintop that I'm going to do this. And I make a real commitment to other people. And that was 12 years ago. Yeah. That was the last time I had a drink.
And that's amazing. It really is. Yeah. And I know we compacted a lot of time and of your life into the last 10 or so minutes, which does not take away how difficult that must have been. Not just how difficult it was to stop and continue not to drink, but how difficult it must have felt that morning when you woke up with the blood and you were looking around. I mean, but something that you said to me when we spoke before is you went into this rebuilding, what we'll call a rebuilding phase of your life, I guess, is how you wanted to make bipolar or these things, okay, they're not going away, so let's look at them as a superpower. Tell us a little bit about your feelings on that.
So within a few months, I didn't do this. I didn't stop. I stopped to save my life and to save my relationship with my girlfriend. That was the impetus. But all of a sudden, within a few months, I started to realize okay, I'm feeling better. Mm-hmm. That's affirming. And then I started to realize okay, I'm actually doing okay at work. And that gave me a green light. And I got a little bit addicted to that feeling of success. Mm. And I started to get back in shape and my body was looking and feeling better. And I started to feel whoa, okay. I need to take care of bipolar. I've just been trying to bury this thing. And I've been taking my pills. I always took my pills, but I haven't treated this in any way. So I started to actually go to my psychiatry appointments, and then they connected me with a therapist. So I started getting therapy. And just from stopping the self-medication and from caring for myself, just within the basic steps I should have been doing all along, it was like the handcuffs had come off me, and all of a sudden, my relationship with my girlfriend, it brought it back to life. It was like we met again for the first time. And because I'm not splitting my loyalty with alcohol. I'm loving her with my whole heart, not waiting for her to go to bed so I can drink. And then I'm not coming into work just obliterated, hungover, unable to function. I'm rested. And all of a sudden I'm realizing oh, I'm pretty good at my job and I'm getting some deals done. And that it was without even trying, the chains just came off me, and just my natural, normal aptitude, ability, creativity, whatever, all the stuff that I had in me, it just was able to flourish. And that's when I realized whoa, this is real evidence. This is real data that if I take care of myself, I'm going to get a lot of positive results and positive affirmation. And that just continued and continued. And I got better and better and better at it. And this wasn't overnight at all.
Of course,
this took a long time. And I was not open about bipolar at all during this. I still was I was open with myself about it. And I was trying to do better at taking care of it, but I still wasn't telling people. That didn't happen until much, much later, within really in the last 3 or 4 years is when I said, okay, I'm not going to keep this as a secret. Mm-hmm. for two reasons. One, I'm going to be my best self if I'm vulnerable about everything that I am. And I'm raw and I'm open about who I am to myself. And the way for me to do that is to understand that like bipolar is not going away. I need to start thinking about it as not just a part of me as like this ball and chain I'm lugging around, but like, this is what I got. And like, maybe it's a blessing in some ways. Like maybe it's a blessing because I've gotten to a point where I can use it to help people who are like in the same spot I was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 12 years ago. And they can see like, okay, there's a pathway out of this. And then I started to see it as a strength for me. Like I do a very good job taking care of myself. I get therapy regularly. I take a heavy dose of mood stabilizer, but I still feel like a lot of swings in my mood. And I try to look at them. I really react drastically to things. And a bad day to me, it still does feel catastrophic. But I try to see that as like, okay, the same intensity that I react negatively to things with, like I have that same intensity when I want to apply it to something. And I started to see my mood swings as like, maybe there are a certain kind of vigilance, or maybe there are a certain kind of strength that I can use. And if I'm feeling extremely down, like, okay, I'm going to use that same amount of energy and intensity to be vigilant about solving the problem, whatever it is. And I started to recognize like, okay, I can use that to care so much more about what I'm doing. And that's a little bit of me trying to, make lemonade a little bit, but I think it's real. Like there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of intensity. There's a lot of erratic energy in me at times. And if I figure out like, okay, how I can use that to attack a problem or build my business, that's going to be for the good. And like about 2 or 3 years. So the handcuffs coming off. I want to
stop for a second. I want to point that out because I'd never heard it said that way. You mentioned as removing the handcuffs. Imagine trying to do stuff with hands behind your back, and that's how you kind of looked at the alcoholism, right? Is that it was stopping you from your full potential, and I just think that's a really good way to put it. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. Sorry for talking a lot, but I'm trying to pack it all in for you. So there's like a certain point 2 years in when I'm feeling like, okay, work is going really well. My relationship with my wife is like back on track. We went from like on the verge of just being completely done to her coming back. And then 2 years later, we got married. Like that person this is the person that saw me in a psychiatric hospital when I was 22 or whatever, and had watched me spiral into the shittiest worst places below rock bottom. And we got married because she's a fucking angel is why, but she stuck with me and didn't give up on me. And then at the same time, like work is kind of going in the same direction. And I have this idea, like, you know what, like I'm on a roll now. Maybe I can start my own business. And I didn't know shit about it. And I didn't really have much of a clue about what that really meant, but I had this idea and it was a spark, and I was young enough to have enough energy to do it. And I hadn't saved a lot. I had burned through most of my money, but I had just done like one big, like real estate transaction. I had a big commission check, and I was like, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to start an office, and I'm going to start a company. So I did. I got like a sublet in a room, got a computer, just got myself set up, and like that was it was about 10 years ago, and I started chipping away at it. Then I got a part-time employee, then I got an assistant, then I got a couple more people. Started with one client, then I had two, and I was hustling, I was grinding, and I had so much energy and zeal and just appreciation and gratitude for life that like I wanted to get after it. Like whatever I was doing, I wanted to absolutely work at it. And now we got like 50 people at the company, and
you say 50? 50?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Good for you, man.
Yeah. Oh, and like I have an amazing group of people that have helped make that happen, to be sure. But we invest in real estate. We manage a lot of real estate. We do like leasing, office and retail transactions, kind of a vertically integrated shop. And that did not happen overnight by any means. That was just like grinding away a little bit at a time. But like the takeaway for me in that, and that's like why, like, that's why we're here talking, is because I realized at a certain point, like, I don't want to be the only one that has this, and I'm not, but I want more people to have this experience of rebounding from what I've rebounded from. And I want more, like, whether it's starting a business or whatever your potential is, if you're struggling with mental health or you're struggling with addiction, there is a pathway out of it. And that anything that you imagine is possible really is. Even on those days where I never believed I could start a business. I was starting to believe if I could, like, go on with my life. And in the big picture, that wasn't that long ago. But there is a pathway out of it. And like, it starts with the understanding that you have a problem. It starts with getting rid of that stigma that's in front of you, that's preventing you from talking about it. Because if you're not, like, vulnerable about having a mental illness or an addiction, because we want to bury these things. That's just what we do in our culture. We want to go on, like, we want to drink every night and just pretend everything's fine. We want to, like, we want to keep this depression a secret. We want to keep bipolar a secret because we don't want to have people thinking we're weak or whatever that notion is. But if we can get rid of that and kind of blast through that, all of a sudden, like, anything is possible. And just imagine why go through life tamping yourself down and suppressing your own ability to be at your absolute best. And like, I got to that point of understanding what I had really done, and what I'd accomplished, like, a few years ago. And that's when I started I have a book that I'm going to publish next year.
That's amazing.
It's really,
by the way, that's fucking amazing.
And it tells this story it's not for myself to, it's not a bear all thing. It's for someone who is in that same spot. I mentioned, 75% of people manifesting symptoms of mental illness in their early 20s. It's for someone in that same spot, maybe picking it up, and maybe it helps them change their course a little bit, or see something like, oh, okay, that's exactly what I'm feeling right now, is what this dude was feeling. And now this dude's in a position where he worked through that. So it must be possible. Like, that's what I want more people to feel through talking, through hearing shows like yours, and everyone else who's working in advocacy for mental health. I want people to not see it as something that's got a stigma attached to it that they can't work through.
Man, I couldn't have said it better myself. And when you get that book published, you've got to let me know. We will promote it on this show for sure.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
We'll be happy to. And, David, all the things that you've shared, you've used the word vulnerability a number of times today. You've been very vulnerable about some very, very difficult things. You've been very honest. And I think it's a really extremely inspiring story, and something that even when we spoke before, I had a lot of takeaways from it too. I thought about, what are the handcuffs that I'm putting on myself, things of that nature that really stuck with me. So, as we're wrapping up, I just want to commend you for all the work that you've done, because you're right, it takes a shit ton of work. I want to commend your dog for always being on the lookout.
Oh yeah, he's ready to go.
And I want to thank you for telling your story. Is there anything maybe that we did not get to touch on as we're wrapping up that maybe you would like to share before we close the proceedings, as it were?
Yeah, maybe a thing or two. If there's like a kind of way to, to punch one thing home, I would probably just, like, this is something I say to myself every day, like, because like, things are going a lot better now, and some things are going great, but like, it is absolutely and always will be like a work in progress. I do not wake up every day feeling like, oh man, I solved all my problems and now I'm kicking ass. Like, that's not how I feel. I feel every day that I have to keep pushing forward. And like, if you approach your life that way and you chip away at your obstacles a little bit every day, like 20 years later, something can happen. And that means, like, take drinking, for example. Like, if that therapist or counselor had said, okay, you got to be sober for 10 years, no fucking way.
Yeah.
But if if I say, okay, maybe I can make it till tomorrow, and then maybe I can make it another day. Maybe I can make it the day after that. Then all of a sudden you do that for 10 years, and then you get to look back and be like, oh shit, look how my life is now. And so I think the way I would sum that up is like every day, like you don't have the choice of what obstacles are in front of you, and you don't have the choice to snap your fingers and have all your challenges disappear. But you do have the choice to be courageous every day in the face of them, whatever they are. And so I just try to wake up every day and say, okay, these are my goals. These are my challenges. I'm not going to snap my fingers and have the biggest business ever or completely cure mental illness. But what are the things that I can do today that are hard, that are challenging, that are going to help me chip away at those goals over the long term?
That's, again, couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's right. It's little by little.
Yeah, for sure.
100% sure. David, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate your time. I appreciate you agreeing to come on the show. Just an amazing and inspiring story. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, of course. And to everybody else out there, I'll finish the episode the same way I do or try to do every time, with a reminder, very much a lot of what David was talking about there, with that there is always room for kindness and grace, even within ourselves. And that might be the most important. There is always room for kindness and grace, no matter the obstacle, no matter the situation. And we will see you next time on Sad Times.
You've been listening to A Fourth Hand Joint.